This is, in some sense, I was just telling the Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Manish Tiwari, the former Union Minister, that this session is to explain to all of you the jargons that were used in the previous session. So, in some sense, I'm going to ask you both that how does it really work? The question before us is that how will AI change the way we engage between with citizens, with humans, as they said, human-centric innovation? How do nations engage with each other? What is the texture of partnerships for the future? What are the kinds of institutions and multilateral arrangements that are going to underwrite what's happening in this field of innovation? And I think essentially how are cultures, communities, and nations going to retain a degree of sovereignty in this world where large language models don't necessarily recognize those typical boundaries. So let me first start with Mr. Manish Tiwari and ask him a simple question. AI is already shaping the world in some ways. In your view, which are those two or three broad trends that are quite visible now in terms of the implications of this particular technology and this particular cycle of innovation?
Well, first and foremost, Samir, I would like to thank you and the Observer Research Foundation, along with your partners, for hosting this conversation. I think it's a very important conversation leading up to the AI Summit in February in New Delhi. I think what we really need to do is to circle back to some very fundamental definitions. And the fundamental distinction, or the basic distinction that needs to be drawn, is when you talk about AI for people, what exactly do you imply? What do you exactly mean? Because state good does not essentially mean public good. There is a distinction between the state and the people. And I think it's important here to circle back to the genesis and the proliferation of the internet, because that provides context, and that provides a certain amount of perspective to the conversations that are taking place around AI. See, the internet was the most audacious experiment in anarchy. And
Audacious experiment in anarchy. Okay.
It has succeeded beyond the wildest imagination of its inventors, innovators, originators. The internet today represents the largest ungoverned space on planet Earth. Never before in the history of humankind has so much power concurrently resided on so many fingertips. And I think this is important. What the internet did was that it empowered people. It broke the entire paradigm of top-down communication, democratized public discourse, made it horizontal, and allowed people to get a voice. I think if the internet in the last 2.5 decades has had its greatest success is in democratizing the discourse around the world.
And you believe AI is a directional leap?
No. So therefore, now let me come to the next part of it. And the next part of it is that, what the net did was, today you churn out more data every day than from the dawn of civilization to the turn of the third millennium. So what has happened is, in the past 3 decades, you have a tale of two civilizations. A brick and mortar civilization that evolved over 5,000 years, and a virtual civilization which is evolving.
Over 3 decades.
Over 3 decades. And the future of humankind actually lies at the intersection of these two civilizations. Artificial intelligence has the capacity to be able to take this paradigm to the next level, because the fundamental template, has already been laid by digitization. And here, what you really need to see is, would AI or the deployment of AI, and I'm giving an example and I'll stop there, would it provide sustainable employment, a basic monthly income to 8 billion people around planet Earth, or those who want it?
So paychecks, purpose, and protection to 8 billion people.
Yes.
Okay.
So therefore, the thing is, how is AI really going to be transformative beyond just empowering the state?
So Tom, I'm going to come to you. I think I have a few observations on what Ms. Tiwari just presented before us. Most chiefly, and I'm going to pose this to you. Chiefly, I have a problem with the ungoverned space proposition. Ungoverned, yes, but certainly heavily coded and therefore controlled by those who were coding those spaces. In some sense, it also allowed the single largest creeping acquisition of control by the private sector than there had ever been achieved in previous cycles of industrialization and business. I'm just being provocative here, but Tom, so ungoverned spaces, highly coded spaces, and if we take that leap ahead, is AI going to see greater centralization and therefore a greater degree of intense control by a fewer number of actors?
So first, thank you so much for the invitation. I was super pleased to meet you in India and then in Paris. What you mentioned is a super important question, basically. First, I want to distinguish two kinds of models. The first one are the current models. They are mostly tools that we can use in narrow case. We control those systems. And on those cases, basically, it's a classic competitive situation where the countries that will invest the most will have the most benefit of those tools and then the productivity associated to that. On the other aspect, we have the frontier models. The frontier models require a lot of compute, a lot of energy. And regarding the order of magnitude that we need to train those models, only the US and China can train the bigger one and the one that will be used to be used as not only a tool, but as agent. And on those specific models, my fear is that we will have concentration of power in two big countries, because once you can have agents that can automate part of the research, part of the development, then you multiply by factors what you can produce in a company, for instance. And this is critical. This could be concerning for France, for India. And that's a reason why international coordination can be critical, because compute is very limited. The supply chain have a lot of bottleneck everywhere. And we want to use this compute to diffuse AI for adoption, and this needs proactive effort. So I expect that we can cope this problem.
But Tom, let me ask you directly.
Yeah.
US and China seem to be in a league of their own, especially in terms of both the compute and energy that they can invest in building models, frontier models that you just mentioned. How do countries like France or India or any others navigate this new reality that you have these two large centers of AI dominance?
Yeah.
What is the conception of sovereign AI? And I'm going to come to you after that, Mr. Tiwari. What does sovereignty really mean in this age of AI when you are largely going to be choosing either DeepSeek or ChatGPT? I mean, I'm just making it crude and maybe less nuanced, but you know what I mean.
And the first thing is exactly what we're doing today, is being together. Like the first thing, partnership between other countries, France, India, Europe, and so on. This is the first thing. You cannot be a central player if you're like one single countries outside US and China. This is the first thing. The other one is to invest in compute for adoptions, because if you do not do that, you will be far behind. You will be far behind from an economic perspective. And then this is not enough. You cannot solve the problems caused by the frontier models, so those developed in the US and China, from France. So you have to ask for guarantees to those countries. And India, France can work together to ask guarantees from US models and Chinese models. What I mean by guarantees is like, do they have backdoors in their models? Do they include our languages, for instance? Are those models safe enough if I put them in my public administration, for instance? Clearly, by default, the answer is no. But to change this no in a yes, it will not happen by default. We'll have to push a lot. And I think multilateralism and
countries will have to partner to demand better tech governance, to demand better accountability from the countries and companies that are currently dominating the field of AI. I think that's the point you're making.
100%.
Okay. Mr. Tiwari, what does sovereignty really mean in the age of AI?
First, Samir, to circle back to your observation about concentration of power in private corporations. But that's been the sine qua non now going back to the first industrial revolution. No industrial revolution has ever been government-led. Every industrial revolution from the first to the fourth has been led by innovation and entrepreneurship of either people or companies. So under those circumstances, that is a reality that we need to live with. Number two, look, eventually the guys who are creating these AI models, they are businesses at the end of the day. Businesses have employees, they have shareholders, they have boards. So therefore, they are accountable on a quarterly cycle to a profit imperative. So therefore, to expect them that they would, become philanthropic overnight because AI is something which is acutely transformative, I mean, you're living in cuckoo's land, really. So therefore, then how do you really democratize AI? How do you ensure that there is equitable balance? How do you ensure that there are more country-specific or multilateral AI models that emerge? For that, governments will have to invest. You'll have to put your money where your mouth is. So therefore, if you are skeptical about deploying DeepSeek into your public institutions or your governance systems, then you jolly well walk the extra mile and do create your own model so that you are eventually in control and ownership of that. And then coming to the whole question of sovereignty, well, the internet destroyed sovereignty. So therefore, while you do exist as Westphalian states, but the fact is you spend the better part of your working day in a virtual civilization. In fact, the whole concept of digital sovereignty has evolved to an extent where if you really want, you can create a country of your own in a virtual civilization with its own set of laws, with its own currencies. And, you've had the great innovation in cryptocurrency, which was a challenge to the oneness of currency. So therefore, I don't think you can look at artificial intelligence in a silo. You have to contextualize it in terms of the other developments which are taking place. And if you look at it as a whole, then sovereignty is an outdated concept. But the concurrent paradox is that sovereignty is there. Russia and Ukraine. What's happened in the Middle East? What's happened with the rise of China? So this is the paradox of our times.
So Mr. Tiwari, let me ask this question to both of you, both Tom and you. Are we suggesting that multilateralism, or at least multilateral cooperation, to build certain rules for the road, as it were, even if you're not ambitious and we don't want to create laws for the road, even if we were to build norms and principles, is that something that's possible? And who and where should that process begin? Who should be underwriting this kind of an effort? And which body, which institution, which arena is best suited to take this conversation forward?
So that's also a critical question. Where to start? I think a problem we have today is on the training part, because AI development is super fast, basically. In 2019, models like GPT-2 were only able to count from 0 to 5, and now we have models that are gold medalists in international math competitions, top 10% in international cybersecurity competitions. So the capabilities are moving fast. And to follow the pace of AI development, you have to be trained, and you have to be every day hands-on the literature, basically. And it's super hard for a lot of countries to be able to follow the pace of AI development. So I think the well-developed countries have a responsibility to help other countries being more informed of the state of the art on those models. And where this can start is basically with countries that are outside the US and China, but that are super developed and that can bring the topic on the table. Basically India, France, UK, at the European level. I think this is the best way to start. And then what we saw during the AI Action Summit is moving from a small number of countries to discuss about state-of-the-art models to more inclusive, more inclusion, including like countries from Africa and so on, broadening the spectrum of the topics, because it's also a way to involve other players. And then, once the training is done, once we have capabilities to follow the pace of AI development, then it's something to discuss, but then we have to act. And where to act, I think summit like the AI Indian Summit is a super great opportunity to discuss how we can first deploy AI in our economy, and second, what can we ask other countries to what I just mentioned earlier, to those big players, because they are in a place to run the world in AI, but we have a lot to request from them. So if we are not here to be vocal and to ask, they will not do it by default. And I think where to start, by developed countries, doing those summits, and it's probably the best place to engage globally and to make sure we will move the world toward what you just mentioned, a more open world, multilateralism, and avoid the concentration of power that could be the by default scenario if we're just like doing nothing.
Mr. Tiwari, you as Sangman, do you believe that the summits will have Mr. Trump and his team agree to becoming more benevolent and generous?
Look, as someone who's fundamentally a lawyer, I do not like ungoverned spaces. And I do feel that we must have agreed rules of engagement. And again, I'll circle back to the internet conversations because that's a template which exists. In the late 90s and the early 2000s, you had a chance to put agreed rules of engagement in the virtual civilization or around the world virtual civilization. But it was derailed by all the first freedom right absolutists, essentially based in the Silicon Valley in the name of innovation. Right? So therefore, regulation will stifle innovation. So therefore, there should be no regulation. And as a consequence, like you saw the rise of the internet during our lifetime, you also are seeing the demise of the internet in many ways. For example, China has firewalled it, made it a huge intranet. Now the net is also getting balkanized in terms of, cultural spaces, cultural hegemonies, your geopolitical hegemonies. But in the case of AI, fortunately, we didn't make that mistake. And the reason why I'm saying that is that the EU law on artificial intelligence is an excellent template.
Unlike some of the earlier versions of trying to control the
absolutely
internet in mass.
Absolutely, I think this whole template which is risk based, which essentially talks about graded risk and puts certain
responses based on the risk
there are certain do's and don'ts in the in the public space is an excellent way of doing it. And number 3, to expect the US or China to give in, well, let me cycle back 80 years when the atomic bomb was created,
How many
right?
people?
I mean, the US did not give the technology to anybody except, where they had a special relationship. Everybody went and evolved, developed, stole, and created their own programs. So there is no charity when it comes to a geopolitical instrument of control and domination. And yes, the AI is a tool, is an instrument of both control and domination.
So Tom, I'm going to ask you a more direct question. If since you were there at the Action Summit, you're going to be in Delhi for the Impact Summit. What are the 2, 3 concrete measures that India and France should now be thinking of implementing jointly to be able to have more room to maneuver in an arena where there will be no quarters given by the dominant actors? So, in real terms, in real practical terms, how can, like the ambassador mentioned, that France has a evolved ecosystem around AI. India, of course, has a population scale diffusion platform. Um, can What are the 2, 3 big areas that could really be put together? As someone was mentioning, that today we all have to deal with the tech triad. We need energy, we need compute, right, and we need, of course, a whole regulatory architecture that enables innovation and and of course startups and entrepreneurs. So where can we work together?
So my answer in 2 words is what I call differential acceleration. On one way, we need to accelerate on the diffusion and deployment. And to do that, you have the answer: compute, coordination, data. Startups could help on that. I saw a few fintech startups in India. I was impressed. So they can come in Paris. That's a great way to start. This is for models that are like current AI models. And that's why I love the output of the AI Action Summit with the current AI Foundation. It's critical to be focused on current AI models and to diffuse them everywhere in the economy, because this will result as increase in productivity and serve people, planet, prosperity. It's not for nothing that this was a keyword of the summit, I guess. And on the other part, the main keyword is the verification and the evaluation. Because today, I was an evaluator of frontier AI models. And when we evaluate models pre-deployment, models from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, we find a lot of vulnerabilities. And then they deploy the models, and we have no guarantees that the model deploys is the one that have been evaluated. So from an Indian or French perspective, we need not only to trust them by default when they speak, we need to be able to verify. We need to be able to verify even if we distrust them sometimes. And on the nuclear analogy you just mentioned, we have ways to verify claims that are made by the Pakistan, by everyone on Earth, because we test the enrichment of uranium, for instance. On AI, on frontier AI models, at this stage, we do not have the verification technologies to verify their claims. If they claim they've trained a model on this amount of compute, at this stage, I cannot trust them. I don't know. So the other way to be able to be coordinated and have the conditions for coordination and for our deployment is verification. The first one, diffusion, deployment, startup, investment in economy for tool AI. And the second one is verification for frontier AI models.
So, I'm going to move to my final series of questions, which is around people. We started this whole conversation with people, and Mr. Tiwari mentioned at the very beginning, we are talking about jobs, we are talking about improving lives, improving people's access to certain services. We mentioned the India-France partnership. We might be slightly different in the spectrum of demographic priorities that we reside in as countries, right? In certain parts of the world, AI is a essentiality that is going to help them overcome some of the demographic gaps that exist for example, in the workforce or in factory for or for transportation and mobility. In other parts, like in, for example, India, AI is seen as a tool that could allow humans to become more productive, perhaps increase salaries and wages, and climb the ladder in terms of their livelihoods. Right? We are using it differently. The point here is that depends on the geography you reside in. AI becomes a different proposition when it comes to people, right? So my question to both of you is that how do we partner across these demographic realities to agree to a model that serves differential needs in different parts of the world?
I think you'll need to do it in two parts. See, first of all, there's an imperative need that you create your own generic LLMs. Right? So therefore, don't leave it to
Someone else to invent.
to the Chat GPTs or the Groks or the Geminis or the DeepSeeks of the world, because they're already there. So therefore, given the fact that they're there and deployed, does not mean that it should be left to them. So that's number one. So you need investment, you need public-private partnerships, you need multilateral partnerships. If you can put them in place, you need to create your generic LLMs. Number two, then you customize it to specific situations. For example, if in France or across Western Europe, you have a population whose demographics are different from India's, obviously their priorities would be different. For example, in the case of Western Europe, can AI in some manner be used to try and mitigate the social security burden which is there, right? So is that something which can be done? Because since the replacement rate of population is not enough to support such a huge social security apparatus, and which obviously the population is not going to give away. Now, in the case of India, can it be used to really
Drive up incomes?
Well, drive up income is as one. I mean, I think that's the most fundamental thing. Can it create vocations, jobs, livelihoods, right? But the second more important thing is, you see, the footprint of the Indian state, contrary to public perception, is very light on the ground.
Correct.
So therefore, can you deploy AI in your governance models?
To expand the size of governance.
Whereby you make the delivery systems of governance far, far more efficient. In areas like delivery of justice, in areas like delivery of public
social
services.
protection and social.
And well, we've had a issue with social security just last week in Parliament, so I will not address it here. But the fact is that these are the areas where you can, find, learn from each other, from best practices, and customize your models.
Tom, you want to come in quickly on this? Because I want to now open it up to all of you and bring in 3 or 4 of you into this conversation. I think there are mics. My colleagues have mics here, and we'll bring you all in. Oh, there you are. There's Shruti. Okay, so quick response on how do we...
So quickly, I can give a very concrete example. I think it's on recommendation algorithm. Like more than 70% of what we see, like news, LinkedIn, YouTube, and so on, are influenced by recommendation algorithm. Those recommendation algorithms are trained by YouTube, Google, US companies mostly, and they are trained to focus our attention. This is a proxy to bring us more US company, and from a business perspective, invest in your recommendation algorithm, then change the parameters of the recommendation, and you can have a lot of effect on your people, your language, your businesses.
Yes.
I think this is a critical example where today we are influenced without even knowing that we influence.
Okay, so we are going to come to you here. Raise your hands and we bring the mic to you. There's a hand there. A quick identify yourself and pose the question, please.
Hi, everyone. First, I would like to thank you, Embassy of India, as well as OIF, for making the part of this summit. My name is Praveen Soni. I am doctorate in computer science and postdoc in AI. And currently, I am working as a founder CEO of the European Pay. My question is basically when you mention it is France and India is open for the young entrepreneurs. Currently, as I am working on the fintech, the major problem what we are facing is the regulatory. When we are talking about especially the AI have to apply on data. What young entrepreneurs don't have the access of the PhD to apply their AI-based model for the transactions or the data because of the regulations. As I am building something for the cross-border where users from India can pay in France and vice versa. So this is one of the problems what we are facing. Do you think now is the time to redefine and recycle or rethink about the regulatory law on the payments on both the countries? Like, for example, if I will say, if let's consider as a Luzan or the Manoj who is buying a wine or the cheese in Paris and getting some cashback, and that cashback or the reward can be used by buying a samosa in the New Delhi.
Okay, that's a slightly complicated question because it has wine and samosa in it. Okay, but I think his point here is that I think you got it. What
It's
he's
a
very important question.
very important and profound question, and I must thank you for that. You see, eventually, what if I've understood the question properly? What you're saying is that if you really want AI models which go cross-border, you will have to also
Allow.
modify your regulations and your laws in
movement.
yeah, and in order to allow that to happen, and especially in the field of foreign exchange and currency laws, etc. Sovereigns are very sensitive on these issues. And so, therefore, there is a need to have a larger conversation. For example, in India, we are not very favorably disposed towards the cryptocurrency ecosystem, right? So, therefore, because we feel that it's a challenge to the oneness of currency and to sovereignty in certain senses of the word. But eventually, as you move forward, till the time you do not adopt a more permissive outlook towards some of these questions, the true potential of what AI can bring in terms of benefits or ease of delivery or ease of living to the people would not really happen. I mean, it's a very profound thought. Thank you.
Tom, I think that gave us a question to you. Is regulation burdening young entrepreneurs? Are smaller companies bearing the brunt of regulatory architectures? That's something that
Regulatory arbitrage.
And regulatory arbitrage. That's something that's true for India. It's true for Europe. I'm saying this. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying that perhaps something that the Americans say might have a certain degree of truth in it. That we do stifle innovation in our geographies. Any thoughts on that?
So clearly the answer is yes. By default, regulation is a way to constrain in a specific direction the innovation. So clearly, yes. Sometimes it's for the best, sometimes it's for the worst. And from an entrepreneur perspective, I can see how this could be frustrating, and I was one of them. I can give you another example in the other side of the spectrum. When you have to build airplanes, basically, we have been the country that have regulated earlier, and then we succeeded to invest a lot on robustness, on security, and at the end of the day, we had Airbus that was much better than Boeing, at least from my perspective. I'm a bit biased. But now when I took a plane, I prefer being in an Airbus than in Boeing. So it's a clear example where regulation can help.
So what you're saying, over time, regulation begins to give you benefits which are tangible. I think that's the point you're making.
Sometimes it's clearly the case, and that's the example I just mentioned. Sometimes not that much. In specific areas, you just let people without regulation and the outcome is better. So it's not a by default regulation is bad or good. It's like, it depends on the objective. And what's the objective at the end of the day? I think it's what I mentioned. We need to deploy much more. So to deploy AI, you can facilitate the deployment. And this could be true by reducing a bit the regulation on some specific aspect. On the other way, regarding frontier models, you have, as I mentioned, to ask for more guarantees for frontier models from the US, from China. And to do that, how can you do that without having regulation? You cannot, probably. You need to follow the international laws, so you need to shape this governance to then have arguments to ask for more requirements.
Okay, we have a question there. Please go ahead. Identify yourself and ask a question.
Hi, I'm Rahul Gaurav. I'm a neuroscientist at the Paris Brain Institute and very Indo-French because we are very actively working with the colleagues from France India Foundation who are here and also from Sorbonne University with AIMS and IIT Delhi on which is and will be even more crucial topic. Thus, the challenges particularly related to AI in health. So given I come from the hospital background of France, so the sharing of data is very, very difficult. We have very active people from both countries wanting to contribute very actively for world-class projects. But it's many things is not even allowed to share. So it's very much a question. Eventually, it comes to like sort of a public policy type question from the French colleague as well as the Indian colleague. So what do you think about that? Because more and more it becomes Indo-French in the future. And if we have these regulations of not being allowed to share, let's say, the genetic data, even in very anonymized from MRI data.
No, I got your question. I think, I've heard this from a few folks, Manishji, that even within countries, health data is not that easily shareable. Across borders is nearly impossible. So how do you create AI that responds to the health challenges of our time when anonymized health data itself is very difficult to?
So we spent many agonizing weeks over these questions when we were doing India's data protection law, right? And so therefore, anonymization of data, randomization of data, cross-border data transfers, obviously were issues which engaged our attention. When it came to health data, now that was critical personal data. And that really went to the heart of the privacy debate. So under those circumstances, what I think ultimately the law which the government enacted does have a consent mechanism whereby you can transfer your personal health data provided you give consent. But yes, you're absolutely correct. When it comes to sensitive personal data or critical personal data, including biometrics, including your iris scans, etc., that's a tough one. And I agree that people who want large data sets to be able to innovate or to come to some conclusions, build solutions, it's a challenge. And frankly, I have not wrapped my head around that.
Tom, you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I don't have that much to add, but from a technical perspective, I personally do not want to see all my health data everywhere on the internet. So what I could suggest is to invest much more on what we call zero knowledge proof, where you can train models, learn from the data without having the exact data.
Synthetic data.
Yeah, you can learn from synthetic data. That's the first thing. You can learn from the structure of the data. And you have a lot of information here. And this is often neglected just because it's harder. So yeah, that's the main thing I want.
I think we have run out of time, but thank you for your questions. And please join me in applauding the panelists for their interventions this afternoon.